Okay.
That's the only, okay, good morning, everyone. Happy to be here. Thank you, for the invitation to be here. Thank you also for organizing this conversation for the second time running. Consistency is a topic there. We are claiming that. But also, I think that the topic for this year's African Cyber Law Conference is very much thought-provoking. And so I wanted to align myself to the topic, but use the opportunity to share lessons that I've learned in the work that I do, but also more importantly for me, the lessons that we've learned doing the work that we do at Data Science Law Lab at UP. And so that's why the topic. So what did I press? Thank you. So these are the three questions that I have situated my intervention on. So what is governance? And when I'm asking the question about what is governance, it's really about what do we mean, or what do I understand from when we say resilient and responsible design? What does it mean in the context of governance of AI, or digital expression, or digital media? And then who governs? Who is the person governing? And I really like that this keynote is coming after the panel discussion that just happened, because of that aspect of participatory governance that we had come out from that conversation. And then what works, what is working, what is not working, why is what is working, and why is what is not working, not working. So those are questions that we have to answer when we think about that whole concept of resilient, responsible design of governance. And so I always also like to start from a place of common understanding so that we are on the same page. So when we hear about responsible and resilient design, or design generally, I hear it a lot in the construction industry, construction space, where you talk about how you design a building in a way that is responsible, but also in a way that the building itself is resilient. And when you think about that in the context of governance, you're looking at, for responsible governance, you're thinking about ethics, you're thinking about rights, you're thinking about accountability. So if you are designing governance of AI, of digital media, of expression, you are then thinking about, is it ethical? Does it respect human rights? Does it speak to mitigation of algorithmic harm? For example, we hear a lot about explainability of AI, where then we're thinking, are these systems accountable? And accountable to who? Are they transparent? Do we know what ideas and formulations led to the decisions that they make, or to the outcomes that we see? Do we understand how we move from development to impact? Do we understand how these technologies affect the very people that are engaging with it or that are using it? So responsible design is asking, are we governing AI ethically? Are we governing it in a way that is accountable, in a way that is transparent? When we speak about resilient design of governance, we are then thinking, when we have design governance systems for these technologies, for expression, for digital media, will they still work tomorrow? Are they adaptable to changes? Are they durable? Will they stand the test of time? Will they be quick to recover from disruptions, from changes that happen in the environment? And the way that I see governance is that governance is a system. It's not one thing. It's a combination of a lot of things. So there's law, yes, and in that zone, of course, lawyers, people who are lawyers like me are comfortable in that zone where you're looking at regulations, where you're looking at the statutes that we have and saying this is how we govern. But it's beyond that, because you're also looking in the, especially in the AI space, and not just in AI, but with data-driven technology, you're looking at how the data determines what people do, right? How the data determines how the system will operate. And that's why also we speak about the importance of having data that is representative of the people that are going to use the outputs from the development and deployment of AI or of any technology, really. You're also thinking about markets and how markets provide some form of regulation. You're also thinking about platforms as well. So one good example is on YouTube, for example. If you had content that you want to upload on YouTube or any of the digital platforms that we know and that are popular, you don't have to pay anything. All you need is to have a Gmail account, right? So you are not paying any money to the owners of YouTube. You just upload your content there. If I wanted to see what you've uploaded on YouTube, usually I also don't have to pay money. I just need to have internet access, and I am able to access your content. Over time, if you had a YouTube channel, how many people have a YouTube channel? Okay. So if you have a YouTube channel, you over time build followership. Maybe there are subscribers to your channel who get notified when you post content. Maybe you have this very popular, maybe life-changing content where you have like maybe 1 million views, 327 million views, whatever number of views, right? You get attached to what that says about your work, what that says about your content. And there are people who have complained that for reasons not known to them, but reasons best known to YouTube, they wake up one day and maybe they disable access to your channel. And they say, oh, you contravened this community rules, or we picked up that you did something wrong, and they withdraw your access. In that moment, are you going to go to court to enforce your rights to own a YouTube channel? It's their property. You are merely given the opportunity to have access to the platform. So all this is to say that governance happens in different ways. And you then start thinking about who is governing, because the person or the entity who is governing, if they don't have legitimate authority, there's going to be problems, right? If they had legitimate authority, but there are no systems to question their authority or the exercise of their authority, we also have a problem, right? So you are thinking about responsible and resilient design of governance in that space, and then thinking about who are the people in positions of authority and what are they doing with that power that they have, and how is that affecting our rights as citizens of a given country or citizens of the world. And you then take that to the point where you then start saying, when platforms make rules, or when platforms provide their own brand or their own form of governance, and it affects people adversely, what laws or what governance systems are we going to use to assess what they have done? Are we going to base it on the Constitution? Are we going to base it on a specific statute of what country, Constitution of what country? Those are questions, right? And then more and more and more, we also see us in this space as people who are researchers, and we come up with our scholarly publications where we make recommendations, where we say, this is how we understand the law, this is how we think the law should go. We do empirical research where we connect with members of society and see how the law works in actual practice. So basically, governance is a system, and you're looking at that system and then thinking, who are the players here? But also governance has many forms. I've talked about the fact that you could have governance happening at the level of, democratically elected authority, where you have, your executive, your legislative arm, and the judiciary as well. And then I've talked about the fact that you have industry, where you have platforms that set their terms of use, their terms of service, their community guidelines, and those things are even enforced quicker than you have laws. So the time that it will take for, I don't want to keep using YouTube as an example, but they are my scapegoat today. I'll keep using them because I saw the problem. So, but that could apply to any platform that you can think about, whether it's Instagram, whether it's TikTok, whether it's X, whichever one. There are people online on these social media platforms expressing themselves, speaking out about things that they care about, right? And the more and more we see the community guidelines, the terms of use, the privacy policy, all the policies that sometimes we cannot keep track of, that these platforms come up with, they provide a form of governance. I remember, I think in 2020, 2021, thereabouts, Nigeria's president at the time made a tweet. It was still Twitter at that time. And he said something that sounded like he was threatening war on certain, on my tribe, actually. So I feel personally impressed. I still do. But anyway, he was making reference to some tweets that other people have made, where they were saying things about this country needs a revolution, blah, 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 blah. People were just, expressing themselves. And he made the point, he was trying to say that war is not something that you refer to casually, that you have to, that the decision to go to war is not something that you arrive at, in a carefree manner, that you have to have thinking about it. Anyway, Twitter said this was inflammatory and threatening of a particular or a specific class of or members of the country, and so they disabled his Twitter account, so he could not tweet. And that was a form of what? Depending on who is looking at it, you could say that was a form of censorship, where I have the right to be on this platform. Donald Trump was also kicked out of Twitter at some point as well, so it's not just the former Nigerian president. But what then happened after? You would then see that those people would also react to the way that those platform rules addressed their actions. So you will either see that, you will then start thinking, are they abusing their position of authority? Because if me, as an ordinary citizen, if my Twitter account was disabled, there's nothing I can do to Twitter, right? But the president at the time subsequently disabled Twitter for the whole country. So we went months where people could only access their Twitter accounts using VPNs and things like that. So when you are in the country, you won't be able to tweet. In the US, what did Donald Trump do? He started his own, he went on Truth Social, and I don't think he's come back to Twitter. I don't remember, I don't know. I don't follow him on Twitter. But the point I'm making is that you have all these levels of authority, you have all these levels of governance. And you then have to always be thinking about what rules are we going to use to question, to hold accountable people who are in charge of governance at any point, at any layer, at any class of society. I've talked about self-regulation in the form of content rules, in the form of guidelines, in the form of even licenses that you use to determine who has access to what. We hear a lot about open source data, open source AI, and the licenses that are used to release those data, those AI tools say a lot about how you can use them, what you can do with them, and those are still forms of governance. When we talk about the development of resilient AI ecosystems, they also depend on research infrastructure and they depend on data resources. So infrastructure will always be a game changer for enabling innovation. And I wanted to use that point to talk about the work that the conference sponsor does, SADILA, which is to provide to support the creation and the management and distribution of digital language resources and tools that will enable research and development in language technologies. And those infrastructure, like I said, are essential for ensuring that African languages and communities are represented in the digital and in the AI landscape. When we talk about governance, when we have governance discussions, it's very easy to pay less attention to research infrastructure. But if you don't have those infrastructure in place, it is difficult to have the kind of context-aware, context-sensitive kind of innovation that we're looking to see. So about AI governance, there's a lot of activities that we're seeing. We're seeing national AI strategies. We've also seen the AU continental AI strategy. We're seeing a lot of data policies, data governance frameworks. There's growing attention to platform regulation. There are debates about AI, about intellectual property as well. There's law reforms happening. I think last week, Kenya published its draft AI bill, which is now before its parliament, and it's open for public comments. And not just Kenya, there are other, in other jurisdictions in Africa where we're seeing a lot of things happening with respect to AI governance, but also with respect to things that happen on digital media platforms. South Africa's information regulator is working overtime, got Meta to agree to make specific concessions and redress certain issues. The same thing is happening also in Nigeria as well. So there's a lot of activities going on. And the question is then, how do we see responsible and resilient design of governance in these spaces? Are we asking the right questions? Is it making sense? And the key thing here is that evidence matters. And that's where I now have like an intro to some of the lessons I've learned here. So what you see here are some of the projects that we worked on or that we are working on at Data Science Dollar. We have currently a publication project going on legal technical governance of AI in Africa, and it brings together scholars from different countries, from different perspectives, who are interrogating how we end up having legal technical AI governance. And by that, it is governance that is transdisciplinary, where we are not working in silos, where we don't have the lawyers talking to themselves, the computer scientists talking to themselves, and the rest, different people talking to themselves in different disciplines. But where we come to a place of common understanding, where we are working with our respective expertise, our respective context, and bringing that together to address specific issues, in this case, AI governance. We've also we are currently working on this project, which we launched exactly a month ago, catalyzing AI's potential in Africa through intellectual property innovation. And I'll speak to that shortly. But with the Licensing African Data Sets project, one of the things that we have seen is that there's a lot of let me rephrase. One of the things that we've seen is that you find that if you set governance systems or make rules or set out policies from a place of assumptions or from a place of just pure reaction, it rarely works out well. When you are deciding, when it comes to governing AI, governing expression, governing digital media, you have to rely on evidence-led policy. You first have to ask, how are people who are going to be governed rules, how are they going to be affected? What are the issues they have? So that you make policies and you make rules and you set systems that address the evidence that you have found on ground. It doesn't then make sense to import legislations or regulations or guidelines from outside Africa when the context is not the same. Because what you would then find is that there's a mismatch, there's a misalignment between the rules that you have put in place and the people that those rules are supposed to govern. So the key is that evidence the point is that evidence is very key. With the Licensing African Data Set project, what we did was to look at open licensing, specifically when it comes to data sets, African data sets specifically. What you will find is that the way that open licenses work, like Creative Commons licenses, for example, and other open licenses that have been used in the software space especially, is that you just have the one licensor, then there's everyone else who is the licensee. So you say this software or this data set or this AI model, you are allowed to use it for this purpose, for that purpose, and then there are certain conditions that are attached to the license. So you say something like, use this license for any purpose, just to make sure you acknowledge me as the source, for example. And what it then created was a system where someone in Africa, for example, has access to the same model, but they don't have access to compute to then take the data set from the data that they have to the AI tool that they are supposed to be building. But someone, say in the US, has access to compute infrastructure. So they get that openly licensed data set and they run with it. But you're still stuck here trying to figure out, how can I get access to kind of computational power or computational infrastructure that I need to then build a model using this data set. So there's that misalignment. So we then said, knowing about this evidence, it's then not truthful for us to then sit where we are and say open licenses democratize innovation. It makes everything possible. It means that someone in Africa and someone wherever can use this data set and do what? You have the data set, but do you have the resources to take it from A to B? So it's like coming to a poor community and you give them, say, each of them 5 kg of rice, but they don't have anything to cook with. So they have the rice, are they going to eat it raw? No. So you've not solved the problem, right? So you then have to think about context. And that was why we then we had this project, and then we started looking at what kind of license can we develop that is open, but still allows people to leverage on what they have to get access to what they need, then take these data sets forward. And that's how we came up with the Google license, the single license short. So here are the 5 lessons. The first one is that context matters, and I will elaborate briefly because of time. Evidence, I've talked about the fact that evidence needs to guide policy. And then legal and technical systems needs to work together. We can't afford to work in silos. We have to come to a place where we are leveraging on each other's understanding, each other's context, each other's expertise to then create governance systems that work for us. Oversight is very key when it comes to self-regulation. We can't leave the governance to platforms to run how they like. There has to be governance, there has to be regulation or self-regulation. And then competition and access, they matter for resilience. So briefly, I will take us through the 5 lessons and then I will stop talking. Context matters. I remember reading an essay in primary school about how 6 blind men went to see an elephant or went to experience an elephant. And one touched the elephant's ears and said, oh, the elephant is actually very flabby skinned animal. The other one touched the tail and said the elephant is slim and wiggly. So at the end of it all, it was about where you sit and where you experience the elephant. And in our own context, for purposes of our conversation or that we're having in this conference, the point is that context is very key. Where you sit and the problems that you see from where you sit determines how you see the world, determines how you experience governance systems. So if you're creating, if you're designing governance systems and you're not thinking about the context of the people that are going to be impacted by those governance systems, that's highly irresponsible, right? And not to talk of resilience, because those systems that we've created will not stand the test of time because they are not addressing people where their context is. I've talked about the publication project that we did with the legal technical governance of AI. There are people who, and I think you will hear from Professor Oriakoba tomorrow, his keynotes about his own aspects of that particular project. But there are people who look at AI being used in warfare, for example. So we hear all these things about how AI is going to revolutionize the world, how it's going to change things for Africa, how to help us leapfrog. You hear a lot of leapfrog and help and drive change and all that, which is all well and good. But there's also the part about knowing that AI is a dual-use technology. It can be used for good, it can be used for evil as well. And it then matters who is using it and who is deploying it and who is designing it and for what. So those are questions that we have to ask. I think that I am particularly interested when we speak about AI specifically. I am particularly interested in AI that is developed by Africans for Africans, that is aware of African context. Because the AI that we import from outside Africa was not designed with African context in mind. Evidence-led governance. So this is this report we just released yesterday, we just published yesterday, and it's about looking at the state of intellectual property governance of AI in Africa. All over the world, there's a lot of conversations happening around how intellectual property protected materials are being used to train AI. We hear about copyright protected books, copyright protected images and films and things like that that are being used as AI training data. One of the things that you see missing from the conversation, and you will miss it if you don't focus on the fact that we need evidence-led governance, is that remember Prof. Paul was talking about South African languages and how they are being represented in the digital space. There's a lot of spoken or audio versions of African languages. There's more audio than written text in African languages, right? There are a lot of people who can fluently speak their language in Africa, but they can't write as well as they speak. right? So then that then means that if you're looking at a text-based system, we're going to have a lot of problems. More and more and more, we see a lot of work happening by African AI developers themselves who are trying to create data sets in African languages. If you then have that in mind, you are going to be looking at intellectual property governance of AI differently from what, say, someone in the UK or someone in the US is looking at it. I wrote a blog about the Bards Anthropic case in the US, where the court where they ended up OpenAI ended up getting into an out of court settlement agreement with thousands of authors in different parts of the world, including South Africa. But those were authors who wrote in English, right? So, and they are part of that. They are part of that class action settlement because their publisher is in the US. So, if you are then going to think about how does intellectual property affect govern AI innovation in Africa, you're not going to be listening that much to conversations that are happening in the US or in the UK because their context is different. So you always have to look at what is the evidence on ground. How are we being impacted by these systems? What are we looking to govern? What are we looking to regulate? And those are, some of the questions that they're answering. I've already talked about bridging that law and code, bridging that technical legal divide. It's very important that lawyers are not speaking to themselves alone, policymakers are not speaking to themselves alone, researchers are not speaking to only people in their discipline, AI developers are only concerned about how they get access to data without connecting how the law affects even how their data access, even how they scale whatever they come up with. Because if we ignore each other in terms of discipline, in terms of how we look at the world, we will come up with governance systems that don't align with that won't do what they're supposed to do. I've already said that self-regulation needs oversight. We have to be able to figure out a way to have public oversight, transparency obligations, auditing mechanisms for in places and in spaces where we see self-governance happening. Self-governance is a good thing because people need to be able to get behind rules that they set for themselves and rules that they can obey. But it's important to also have oversight over those kinds of governance. Resilient AI ecosystems depend on access to data, depend on knowledge, depend on infrastructure. And in that system, having responsible governance alone is not going to be enough. You need the systems to be resilient enough to evolve with the technologies that they seek to govern. Every time we say it, at least we lawyers, we say that the law is always chasing after technology. There's no law that is going to be able to keep up as you're making it with any technological innovations, with technological disruptions. But you do need to create laws that are technology neutral, so that it's not with every new technology we have to rush and make new laws and come up with new laws. Before we finish the lawmaking and the legislative process, another new technology would have come up, and then we start the whole cycle again and again. We need to be able to have laws that sets the parameters for technological innovation to happen, and then regulate from that perspective. So I'm going to close with 3 questions that I'm hoping will take us through the rest of the conversations that we're going to be having in this conference. So as we discuss responsible design, we should be asking whether those governance systems are also resilient. Even if they are responsible, are they resilient? Are they strong enough? Are they designed in a way to withstand technological disruptions, to respond quickly or quicker to change? Who is setting the governance priorities? Who gets to decide that this is where we start from first? And this is the last thing on our to-do list of what to regulate. Are we being proactive or are we being reactive? And when we are being reactive, what is informing our reactions to changes that we see? How do we build evidence-led governance ecosystems? How do we support both innovation and democratic values? Constitutional rights are very key in this space, and it's easy to forget about people's rights when we are racing to innovate, when we are deciding that we're going to focus on innovation. So we need systems that are responsible, yes, but we need systems that are also resilient enough to evolve with the technologies that they seek to govern. Thank you for your attention. The QR code takes you to some of the publications that I've spoken about, including the State of IB Governance of AI in Africa report. Thank you, and I welcome your comments, thoughts, questions, and wish everyone a good day. That's it.